The dark Mafia boss left a $0 tip, but the single mom waitress found a secret note under his plate, and what he wrote left her in shock. The man in booth 7 has been leaving $100 tips on $12 meals for 11 months now. And I still don't know his name because he's never once asked for mine or made small talk beyond polite thank yous, delivered in a voice that's deeper than it needs to be, and does things to my stomach I absolutely refuse to acknowledge as attraction. He comes in every Tuesday and Friday at exactly 6:30 in the evening when the dinner rush is winding down and my shift is almost over. Orders the same thing without looking at the menu, black coffee and whatever the special is. And he watches my son color at the corner table with an intensity that should feel creepy, but instead feels protective in a way that makes me simultaneously grateful and deeply suspicious of his motivations. Tonight is no different except for the way his jaw tightens when Ethan starts coughing, that wet, rattling sound that means his asthma is acting up again, despite the medications I can barely afford, even with the mysteriously generous tips that keep appearing on my tables. I'm wiping down the counter and pretending I'm not hyper-aware of the man's attention shifting between my son's labored breathing and the inhaler I keep on the shelf behind the register, and I catch him counting on his fingers like he's tracking something I can't see, doing math that has nothing to do with his bill and everything to do with my son's medication schedule that he somehow knows without ever asking. More coffee. I'm standing at his table before I consciously decide to approach, the pot in my hand more excuse than necessity since his cup is still 3/4 full. And up close I can see the exhaustion in his dark eyes that suggests he sleeps as poorly as I do, for reasons that are probably nothing like mine, but somehow feel connected in ways I don't want to examine too closely. Or, no thank you, I'm fine. His voice is low and carefully controlled, but there's something underneath it that sounds like he's holding back words he thinks I'm not ready to hear. And when his eyes finally meet mine, there's a flicker of something heated that disappears so quickly I might have imagined it, except my pulse is suddenly racing in a way that has nothing to do with carrying coffee pots. You know, most men who stare at women this intensely at least have the decency to ask for their phone number first. The words come out before I can stop them. Months of wondering about this mysterious regular, finally pushing past my usual professional filter, and I watch his lips twitch into something that's almost a smile before he controls it. I'm not staring at you. I'm observing the excellent service and wondering how you manage to keep smiling when you're clearly exhausted. Observing. That's a fancy word for staring, and you do it every Tuesday and Friday like you're memorizing something. I refill his cup, even though he said he didn't want more, because my hands need something to do, besides noticing how his shoulders fill out that expensive shirt. I'm starting to think you either find me fascinating, or you're planning something that requires detailed knowledge of my routine. Maybe both. He says it so quietly, I almost miss it. And when I look at him properly, I see something vulnerable in his expression before his usual mask slides back into place. Oh, your son. He's having a bad day with the asthma. Usually it's better controlled than this, but the weather change always makes it worse. How do you know that? How do you know anything about his patterns when I've never told you and you've never asked? Because I pay attention to things that matter. And your son's health clearly matters to you, which means it matters to anyone who's been watching you try to hold your life together with determination and coffee. There's admiration in his voice that makes heat crawl up my neck. Have you considered seeing a specialist? Sometimes the standard treatments aren't enough for severe cases. Specialists cost money I don't have even with the generous tips from mysterious customers who apparently think I'm a charity case in need of saving. You're not a charity case. You're a woman who works harder than anyone I know and deserves to be compensated fairly for excellent service and a smile that makes bad days slightly less terrible. He says it without defensiveness or apology, stating facts like they're not up for debate. And the way he's looking at me makes my skin prickle with awareness. I definitely shouldn't be feeling about a customer. That almost sounded like a compliment. Are you flirting with me after 11 months of silent observation? I'm teasing now because the alternative is acknowledging that his words affected me more than they should. Would it be inappropriate if I was... Would you prefer I keep my observations and my compliments to myself? I'd prefer you tell me your name since you apparently know mine and my son's entire medical history. Something flickers across his face that might be regret or possibly fear, and he stands abruptly like continuing this conversation is more dangerous than I realize. I should go. I have a meeting I can't miss. He pulls out his wallet, and I watch with growing confusion as he places exact change on the table for his meal and nothing else. No tip for the first time in 11 months. Just the cost of his coffee and untouched pot roast arranged in neat bills that feel more like a message than payment. Wait, did I do something wrong? Did I offend you by flirting back or questioning the tips? I'm following him to the door, because the absence of his usual generosity feels more alarming than receiving it ever did, like he's withdrawing some protection I didn't know I was depending on. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm the one who crossed lines I shouldn't have crossed by coming here in the first place. He stops with his hand on the door, not turning to face me, but speaking to his own reflection in the glass. Check under your son's placemat when you clean his table. There's something there you need to see. And Emma, for what it's worth, you're far more beautiful than you realize, and any man who had the right to flirt with you properly would be lucky beyond measure. The use of my name when I never told him, and the compliment delivered like a goodbye, make my chest tight with confusion and something dangerously close to disappointment. And then he's gone, disappearing into the parking lot and driving away in a car that's too expensive for this neighborhood but somehow suits him perfectly. Mama, why did the coffee man look sad when he left? Did you make him sad? Ethan's question from across the diner makes me realize I've been standing at the door staring after a man I don't know, like some lovesick teenager instead of a grown woman with responsibilities. No, baby. I think he made himself sad. Some people are very good at that. When I lift Ethan's placemat to clear away the crayons, I find a folded piece of paper that definitely wasn't there when I seated him, and my hands shake slightly as I open it because somehow I know whatever's written here is going to change everything. I know about the surgery. I know you can't afford it. I know the hospital hasn't told you yet that it's the only option left. Don't trust anyone who offers to help without explaining why. Call me when you're ready to hear the truth you've been avoiding. Someone who thinks your smile is worth protecting, even if you never smile at me again. Below the message is a phone number with no name attached. Just 10 digits and a final line that makes my breath catch. P.S. You're right, I have been staring. You're impossible not to look at. The problem is I haven't told anyone about the surgery because the hospital only mentioned it as a possibility during our last visit 2 days ago. Confidential information that's supposed to be private. And this man who's been leaving excessive tips and making me feel noticed in ways I haven't felt since before I became a single mother, somehow knows medical details he has no business knowing. That night after Ethan is asleep, I sit on my bathroom floor with the note spread on my knees and my phone in my hand, rereading that last line about being impossible not to look at and hating how much I want it to be true. The phone rings twice before a voice I recognize answers with my name. Not a question, but a statement, like he's been waiting for this call and knew exactly when I'd break down and make it. You know, most men wait until the third date before admitting they've been staring. I'm using humor to mask my fear because the alternative is falling apart completely. Most men don't spend 11 months watching a woman they have no right to want while trying to figure out how to help her without revealing why they owe her everything. His voice is rough with honesty that steals my breath. Who are you really? And what do you want from me in exchange for whatever help you're offering? My name is Dominic, and what I want is the chance to make sure your son survives what I couldn't prevent. Even if it means you hate me when you learn the truth about why I've been there every Tuesday and Friday for almost a year. And the flirting, the compliments, were those part of some strategy? Or were you being honest about finding me impossible not to look at? That was me losing control of boundaries I should have maintained. That was me forgetting that I'm supposed to be fixing a mistake and not falling for the woman whose life I helped destroy. The confession is raw and unguarded. Meet me tomorrow at the address I'm about to text you. Come alone, and I'll explain everything, including why I'm the last person who should be looking at you the way I do. Chapter 2. The Meeting. The address Dominic texted leads to a coffee shop in the kind of neighborhood where everything costs 3 times what it should, and the people look like they've never had to choose between groceries and medication. And I'm hyper-aware of my secondhand jeans, and the exhaustion I can't quite hide as I push through the door into air conditioning that's set too cold for comfort. He's already there waiting at a corner table positioned so he can see both exits. And when our eyes meet across the room, I watch something flicker in his expression that might be relief, mixed with dread, that I actually showed up, despite every logical reason I had to stay home and block his number. He stands when I approach, a gesture of old-fashioned manners that feels out of place in whatever dangerous situation we're navigating. And up close, in better lighting, I can see details I missed in the dim diner. The way his dark hair has silver threading through it at the temples. The scar along his jawline that speaks to violence survived. The expensive watch that probably costs more than I make in 6 months sitting casually on his wrist like wealth is something he's so accustomed to, he doesn't even notice it anymore. You came. I wasn't entirely certain you would despite how desperately you need what I'm offering. You know, most first dates don't start with admissions of desperation. Usually there's small talk about weather or hobbies before we get to the life or death stakes. I'm using humor to mask my terror because sitting down across from a man who knows too much while looking like he walked out of a dangerous fantasy is making my pulse race for reasons that have nothing to do with fear. Is that what this is? A date? I was under the impression this was more of a negotiation with your son's life hanging in the balance. His voice carries a hint of amusement that shouldn't be attractive given the circumstances, but absolutely is. Well, you did wait 11 months to finally ask me to coffee. That's either very patient courtship or extremely delayed stalking. I haven't decided which yet. Perhaps both. I've never been good at the appropriate timeline for these things. He signals the waitress without breaking eye contact, ordering for both of us with the kind of quiet authority that suggests he's used to making decisions and having them accepted without question. You take your coffee black with 2 sugars. Your son drinks apple juice, but you water it down because pure juice is too expensive, and you haven't eaten a proper meal in 3 days because you've been giving Ethan larger portions to make sure he's getting enough nutrients. The casual recitation of details he shouldn't know makes my skin prickle with awareness that's equal parts alarming and oddly intimate. Like he's been paying the kind of attention most people reserve for things they care about deeply. That's either very observant or genuinely concerning levels of surveillance. I'm leaning toward concerning. It's caring disguised as observation because actually caring would require explaining why I care, and I'm not ready to have that conversation until you've had coffee and something to eat. The waitress brings pastries I didn't order along with our drinks, and I watch Dominic push the plate toward me with an expectant look that makes it clear refusing isn't an option he's prepared to accept. I can't afford whatever fancy pastries cost here. Good thing I'm paying then. Consider it 11 months of delayed breakfast dates compressed into one morning. You're assuming there will be more dates after this one. That's very confident for someone who still hasn't told me his last name or explained how he knows confidential medical information. Castellano. My last name is Castellano, and I'm guessing from the way your face just went pale, you recognize it. I do recognize it because everyone in this city knows the Castellano family, knows they control half the legitimate businesses and probably twice as many illegitimate ones, knows they're the kind of people you don't cross unless you have a death wish or connections that run deeper than theirs. And so you're what? Mafia royalty slumming it at my diner for kicks? Or is there an actual reason someone with your family name gives a damn about a waitress and her sick kid? I'm someone who made mistakes that cost innocent people everything, and your family was caught in the fallout of decisions I made 3 years ago. His jaw tightens with tension. I can see him fighting to control. I can't undo what happened, but I can make sure your son doesn't become another casualty of my failures. What decisions? What fallout? You're being deliberately vague about something that apparently involves me and my son. Your father worked in shipping, legitimate business on the surface, but he got pulled into moving things that attracted the wrong kind of attention. Dominic leans forward, close enough that I can smell his cologne mixing with coffee. He came to me 3 years ago asking for help getting out, asking for protection for his family, and I gave him advice that I thought would keep everyone safe. My father died in a car accident 3 years ago. What does your advice have to do with that? My voice sounds hollow, even to my own ears, because I'm already connecting dots I don't want to connect. I'm not ready to give you all the details yet, not here in public where anyone could be listening. But I need you to understand that your father's death is why I've been leaving those tips, why I've been watching Ethan so carefully, why I can't seem to stay away even though being near you feels like pressing on a bruise I deserve to feel. You're saying you're responsible somehow, that my father died because of something you did or didn't do. I'm saying the situation is more complicated than simple responsibility, and I need time to explain it properly without you running before you hear the whole truth. His hand moves across the table like he's going to touch mine before he catches himself. What I can tell you right now is that Ethan needs surgery within the next 6 weeks, or his lungs will deteriorate past the point where intervention is possible. I know this because I've had specialists reviewing his medical records since his last emergency room visit. That's illegal. Accessing medical records without consent is a federal crime. So is half of what I do for a living. But we're not here to discuss my moral flexibility. We're here to discuss how I'm going to pay for every cent of your son's treatment, and you're going to let me, because your pride isn't worth his life. The bluntness should make me angry, but instead, I find myself staring at this man who's somehow both offering salvation and admitting to crimes in the same breath. And the worst part is he's right about pride being irrelevant when measured against my son's ability to breathe. And if I accept your help, if I let you pay for the surgery and whatever else Ethan needs, what do you get out of this arrangement besides a slightly cleaner conscience? I get to see you twice a week at the diner and know that I'm doing one thing right in a life full of wrong decisions. He says it with such raw honesty that it steals my breath. I get to watch your son grow up healthy instead of attending another funeral and adding more names to the list of people I've failed. And the staring, the compliments in that note, where does that fit into your guilt-driven charity? That's me being selfish enough to want something I have no right to want. That's me spending 11 months telling myself I was just monitoring the situation, when really I was looking for excuses to be near you. His voice drops lower, intimate despite the public setting. That's me realizing that somewhere between the 5th visit and the 100th, I stopped coming to the diner out of obligation and started coming because Tuesday and Friday became the only days that felt bearable. You don't even know me. You've watched me serve coffee and wipe tables. That's not enough information to develop feelings beyond superficial attraction. I know you sing to Ethan when you think no one's listening. I know you give your dinner break food to the homeless man who sits outside even though you're barely eating enough yourself. I know you cry in your car after bad shifts, but you never let your son see you upset. He's leaning even closer now, close enough that I can see gold flecks in his dark eyes. I know you're the strongest person I've ever met, and I have absolutely no business feeling what I feel when I look at you. But 11 months of trying not to feel it hasn't made it go away. This is insane. You're offering to pay for life-saving surgery while simultaneously admitting you're attracted to me and somehow connected to my father's death. Do you understand how completely messed up this situation is? Completely. Which is why I'm giving you an out right now before things get more complicated. He pulls a business card from his wallet and slides it across the table. This is the contact information for the best pediatric pulmonologist in the country. He's expecting your call and he's been briefed on Ethan's case. He'll schedule the surgery and send all bills to me. You never have to see me again if that's what you want. And if I do want to see you again, what then? Do we pretend you're not connected to something terrible in my past and just date like normal people? We take it one coffee at a time and see if what I'm feeling is guilt trying to disguise itself as something else, or if it's actually real despite having the worst possible origin story. You're asking me to trust you when you haven't even told me the whole truth yet. I'm asking you to let me help your son, while you decide if I'm worth trusting with anything else. And I promise that when you're ready to hear the complete truth about what happened to your father, I'll tell you everything, even knowing it might mean you'll never look at me again without hate. The waitress brings more coffee, and I watch Dominic thank her with the kind of automatic courtesy that suggests good manners are so deeply ingrained he doesn't even notice them anymore. And I'm struck by the contradiction of a man who admits to crimes while holding doors and using please and thank you like they matter. And I need time to think about this. I need to process everything you've said and figure out if accepting help from you makes me smart or stupid. Take all the time you need, but take this too. He slides a folder across the table that I hadn't noticed him carrying. Everything about Ethan's condition, treatment options, and cost breakdowns. I had my people put together a comprehensive analysis so you'd have all the information to make an informed decision. Your people, you have people who analyze sick children for you. I have people who do whatever I tell them to do. And I told them your son's health was their top priority until further notice. I open the folder and find detailed medical reports that must have cost a fortune to compile. Every specialist opinion and treatment option, laid out in language I can actually understand, and tucked in the back is a handwritten note on expensive paper. And I know I have no right to ask for anything from you. But if you'll let me, I'd like to keep showing up at the diner on Tuesdays and Fridays. Not for forgiveness or gratitude, just for the chance to see you smile at someone else's table and know that I'm helping make that smile possible. D. You wrote this before our meeting, before you knew if I'd even show up. I wrote it hoping you'd show up, but prepared for the possibility that you wouldn't. Hope has become a dangerous habit where you're concerned. I should walk away. Should take the medical information and block his number and accept the help without accepting whatever complicated feelings he's offering alongside it. But instead, I find myself asking the question I'm most afraid to hear answered. Ian, when you look at me, when you say you can't stay away, is that guilt talking, or is there actually something real underneath all this mess? I started coming to the diner because of guilt. I kept coming because Tuesday nights began to feel like the only honest thing in my life. He finally lets his hand cover mine on the table, skin warm and touch gentle. And somewhere around month 6, I realized I was in serious trouble because I wasn't just trying to fix a mistake anymore. I was falling for a woman I had no business even talking to. The touch sends electricity through my entire body. And the worst part is, I don't pull away even though I should. Even though this is complicated and dangerous, and probably the worst decision I could make, given everything I don't know yet. I'll call the doctor. I'll let you help Ethan because I'm not proud enough to let him suffer when there's a solution. My voice is steady despite my racing pulse. But I need the complete truth about my father before this goes any further between us. I need to know what you did or didn't do before I can figure out if what I'm feeling is gratitude or something more dangerous. Fair enough. When you're ready to hear it, I'll tell you everything. Chapter 3. The surgery Dr. Harrison turns out to be exactly as prestigious as Dominic promised. All Ivy League credentials and an office that looks more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility. And when he examines Ethan with gentle hands and kind eyes, I feel the first real hope I've had in months that my son might actually get better instead of just managing symptoms that keep getting worse. The surgery is scheduled for 3 weeks out, enough time to get Ethan's overall health optimized, but not so long that we risk further deterioration. And when Dr. Harrison casually mentions that all costs have been handled, and I shouldn't worry about billing, I have to excuse myself to cry in the bathroom because the relief is so overwhelming it physically hurts. Dominic shows up at the diner that Friday like he promised, sliding into booth 7 at exactly 6:30 with the kind of punctuality that suggests he's been counting down minutes until he could see me again. And when our eyes meet across the room, I see something in his expression that looks dangerously close to longing before he controls it into his usual careful neutrality. Dr. Harrison says Ethan's a good candidate for the surgery, says his lungs should heal significantly if we can reduce the chronic inflammation. I'm pouring his coffee without being asked, because muscle memory has taken over where coherent thought fails. I know. He called me with an update yesterday. I hope that's not overstepping, but I asked him to keep me informed. You're paying for everything. I think that gives you the right to updates. I slide into the seat across from him even though I should be working, suddenly needing to have this conversation without the barrier of professional distance. Thank you. I know I haven't said it properly yet, but thank you for giving my son a chance at a normal life. You don't need to thank me. I'm doing what I should have done 3 years ago when I still had the chance to prevent all of this. His hand moves toward mine on the table before he catches himself. That familiar, almost touch that's becoming a pattern between us. Tell me about him. About my father and what happened. I need to know before the surgery because I can't have this hanging over us when Ethan needs me focused. Emma, we're in public, and this conversation isn't one you want to have where people can overhear. Then take me somewhere private. Your car, your office, wherever you feel safe telling me the truth about why you've been haunting my diner for almost a year. He studies me for a long moment like he's weighing the wisdom of what I'm asking against the consequences of refusal, and then he's standing and throwing bills on the table that more than cover my entire shift's tips. Need come with me? We'll go somewhere we can talk properly without interruption. His car is exactly as expensive as I expected, all leather interior and technology I don't understand, and the drive takes us to a building downtown that has his name on the directory in the lobby. His office is on the top floor with views of the entire city, and standing there surrounded by evidence of his wealth and power makes me acutely aware of the distance between our worlds that no amount of chemistry can fully bridge. Your father came to me 3 years ago because he'd gotten involved with people who were using his shipping company to move illegal goods. He didn't know what was in the containers initially, and by the time he figured it out, he was in too deep to just walk away. Dominic moves to pour us both drinks from a bar that's probably stocked with liquor that costs more than my rent. He was terrified for your safety and your mother's, terrified that the people he was working for would use his family as leverage to ensure his continued cooperation. So he came to you for help. Why you specifically? Because my family has certain capabilities that law enforcement doesn't. Because I'd helped other people extract themselves from similar situations. And because he was desperate enough to trust a man with a reputation for getting things done regardless of the methods required. What did you tell him to do? I told him to take a business trip, to make it look legitimate and routine, and while he was gone, I'd handle the people who were using him. Dominic's jaw clenches with tension. I can see him fighting. And I told him it would take 3 days maximum, and then he could come home to his family safe and free from any obligations to the people who'd been exploiting him. But something went wrong. Everything went wrong. The people I was dealing with were more connected than my intelligence suggested, and they figured out what your father and I were planning before I could execute the solution. His voice has gone rough with emotion. He's barely containing. He was supposed to be on a plane to a safe location. Instead, his car was run off the road 20 miles from the airport in what police ruled an accident, but we both know was an execution designed to send a message about what happens to people who try to leave. The room feels too small suddenly, all the oxygen being consumed by the weight of what he's telling me, and I find myself gripping the back of a chair because my legs don't feel steady enough to support me without help. You got my father killed, your advice, your plan, it got him murdered and left my mother and me alone. Yes, and I've been trying to figure out how to live with that failure for 3 years while watching you struggle with consequences I created. Chapter 4. The Complicated Truth. Why didn't you just tell me this from the beginning? Why the elaborate charade of tips and surveillance instead of just being honest about what you'd done? Because I'm a coward who'd rather throw money at problems than face them directly. And because seeing you meant dealing with my guilt in a way that writing checks didn't require. He finally looks at me directly, all his careful control stripped away. I started coming to the diner 6 months after your father died. Told myself I just wanted to make sure you were okay. That it was simple surveillance to ensure no one else from that situation came after his family. But it became something else. It became an obsession. It became the only thing in my life that felt real instead of just performance. It became Tuesday and Friday being the days I could pretend I was something other than the man who got your father killed. And Ethan, when did you realize about his asthma? Second visit, I watched him use an inhaler and recognized the severity immediately because my younger brother had the same condition before he died from complications when he was 12. The admission comes out like it costs him something. Or that's when the tips started getting excessive. That's when I began really paying attention to his patterns and medication schedules, because I couldn't save my brother, but I could damn sure make sure your son didn't become another child who died from something preventable. The revelation about his brother reframes everything, adding layers to his motivation that I hadn't considered. And suddenly the intensity of his focus on Ethan makes sense in ways that go beyond simple guilt. You're trying to save him because you couldn't save your brother. This isn't just about my father. It's about your own loss. Both. It's about failing your father and watching my brother suffocate slowly, despite having all the money in the world to throw at the problem. It's about being 12 years old and useless when the person you loved most needed you to fix something you couldn't fix. Dominic, I don't know how to process all of this. I don't know how to be angry at you for my father while also being grateful you're saving my son, while also feeling whatever this is between us that keeps getting stronger despite every reason it shouldn't exist. Then don't process it yet. Focus on Ethan's surgery and recovery. And after he's healthy, we'll figure out if I'm someone you can stand to have in your life, or if the best thing I can do is pay for everything and disappear. What if I don't want you to disappear? What if the truth makes this more complicated but doesn't make me hate you the way you clearly think I should? Then you're either incredibly forgiving or making terrible decisions about who deserves your time. He moves closer finally, close enough to touch but still maintaining that careful distance. Your father's death wasn't intentional. I didn't order it or want it, but my plan failing means I'm responsible regardless of intent. And I don't know how to be near you without feeling like I'm taking something I have no right to want. Maybe that's not your decision to make. Maybe I get to decide who I spend time with and what I'm willing to forgive. Emma, you don't understand what you'd be forgiving. You don't understand the life I live or the things I've done beyond your father's situation. Then tell me. Show me the worst part so I can make an informed decision instead of building fantasies about a man who only exists on Tuesday and Friday nights. I'm involved in businesses that operate outside the law. I've made decisions that hurt people who probably didn't deserve it. I've used violence when other solutions failed, and I've never particularly lost sleep over any of it until I met you. He's trying to scare me away with honesty. I'm not a good man. I'm someone who occasionally does good things to balance out the terrible ones, and getting involved with me would mean accepting that darkness as part of the package. What if I'm tired of good men who can't help when things get difficult? What if I'd rather have someone dangerous who actually shows up when it matters? The words are out before I can stop them, revealing more than I intended about how his presence has affected me over 11 months of careful observation and excessive tips. 1, you don't mean that. You're grateful and confused, and I'm taking advantage by being here when you're vulnerable. Stop telling me what I mean. I'm a grown woman who survived 3 years alone, and I'm capable of knowing the difference between gratitude and actual attraction. I close the distance between us finally, tired of almost touches and careful space. I'm attracted to you. I've been attracted to you since month 3 when you smiled at something Ethan said, and I realized you were actually listening instead of just observing, and finding out you're connected to my father's death doesn't erase that, even though it probably should. This is a terrible idea. Most of my best decisions have been terrible ideas. At least this one comes with good coffee and life-saving medical intervention. His laugh is surprised and genuine, and then his hand is finally cupping my face with the gentleness I've been craving since that first almost touch weeks ago. When Ethan's recovered, and you've had time to really think about what being with me means, ask me again, and I'll give you a better answer than the one I should give you right now. And what answer should you give me right now? That you deserve better than someone who spent 11 months falling for you while being too much of a coward to be honest about why I was there in the first place. Chapter 5. The Longest Night. Surgery day arrives with the kind of terrifying clarity that makes every moment feel simultaneously too fast and unbearably slow. And I'm sitting in a waiting room that's too quiet and too clean, while my son is somewhere behind sterile doors, having his chest opened so doctors can fix damage that accumulated over years of struggling to breathe. Dominic shows up 20 minutes after they take Ethan back, even though I didn't tell him the exact time, just mentioned it was today during our last conversation. And the fact that he somehow knew when to appear and chose to be here anyway makes something crack in my chest that I've been trying to keep carefully protected. You didn't have to come. I know you're busy, and this isn't your responsibility beyond paying the bills. I don't look at him when I say it, because if I see concern in his eyes, I'm going to completely fall apart, and I need to hold it together until I know Ethan is safe. I'm exactly where I need to be. Nowhere is more important than here right now. He sits in the chair beside me, instead of maintaining polite distance, close enough that our shoulders are almost touching. How are you holding up? I'm terrified and trying not to think about all the things that could go wrong, so basically I'm a mess pretending to be functional. That's the most honest answer I've heard all week. Everyone else pretends they're fine when they're clearly falling apart. His hand finds mine between our chairs, fingers threading through with a gentleness that contradicts everything I know about his capacity for violence. You don't have to pretend with me. You're allowed to fall apart if you need to. If I start falling apart, I won't be able to stop. I'll completely unravel, and then who's going to be strong for Ethan when he wakes up scared and in pain? Then I'll be strong for both of you until you can put yourself back together. The simplicity of the offer, the absolute certainty in his voice that he's capable of holding me up if I collapse, makes tears I've been suppressing finally spill over despite my best efforts to maintain control. He pulls me closer without hesitation, letting me cry against his shoulder while his hand strokes my back in soothing circles. And I let myself take comfort from a man who's connected to the worst thing that ever happened to me. Because right now he's also the only person who showed up when I needed someone most. I'm sorry. I'm getting tears all over your expensive suit. I have 12 more expensive suits. Ruin as many as you need to. We sit like that for over an hour, him holding me while I cycle through terror and hope and exhaustion. And somewhere in the quiet intimacy of shared waiting, I realize that what I feel for Dominic Castellano has moved far beyond gratitude or simple attraction into something deeper and more dangerous that I'm not ready to name yet. Tell me something about you that has nothing to do with my father or guilt or any of the complicated history between us. I need the distraction of conversation to keep from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. What do you want to know? Anything real? What do you do when you're not running businesses or leaving excessive tips at diners? I collect first edition books, specifically mysteries and noir fiction from the 40s and 50s. I have an entire library at my house that nobody knows about because it seems too soft for someone with my reputation. The admission comes with a slight smile. I also can't cook to save my life. I've burned water on multiple occasions, which is why I eat out constantly. You collect books and can't cook. That's surprisingly normal for someone who terrifies half the city. I contain multitudes. Most of them are terrible, but occasionally something decent sneaks through. I don't think you're terrible. I think you're complicated and carrying guilt that's making you see yourself as worse than you are. Or you're seeing me through a filter of gratitude and attraction that's making you ignore red flags you'd normally run from. Maybe both things can be true simultaneously. Maybe you're dangerous and kind, guilty and trying to make amends, complicated in ways that should scare me, but somehow don't. Dr. Harrison appears in surgical scrubs before Dominic can respond, and I'm on my feet instantly with my heart in my throat while trying to read his expression for good or bad news before he even speaks. The surgery went perfectly. Ethan's lungs responded better than we expected, and the repair work should significantly improve his breathing capacity. The relief is so overwhelming I actually sway on my feet, and Dominic's hand is immediately on my elbow steadying me. He's in recovery now, and you can see him in about 30 minutes once he's more alert. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm crying again, but this time from relief instead of fear. And when I turn to Dominic, I see his own eyes are suspiciously bright with emotion. He's trying to hide. He's okay. He's actually going to be okay. I told you he would be. Dr. Harrison doesn't fail. You were worried too. Don't pretend you weren't sitting here just as terrified as me. Completely terrified. I've been negotiating with various deities I don't believe in for the last 2 hours, just in case any of them were listening. Chapter 6. Recovery and Proximity. Ethan's recovery takes 3 days in the hospital, followed by strict bed rest at home for 2 weeks. And Dominic shows up every single day with books and games and a patience with a bored 6-year-old that surprises me given his usual intensity with everything else. I watch him read stories with different voices for each character. Watch him let Ethan win at card games that I know he's deliberately throwing. Watch him be gentle and kind in ways that make it harder to remember why letting him into our lives is probably a terrible decision. You're good with him. I didn't expect that given your usual terrifying demeanor. I'm leaning against the doorframe of Ethan's room watching them build an elaborate pillow fort that's probably going to collapse the moment Ethan tries to crawl inside. Kids don't scare me. Adults with agendas and ulterior motives scare me. Kids just want to build forts and hear stories. He's getting attached to you, asking when you're coming back whenever you leave. Is that a problem? Should I be maintaining more distance? He looks genuinely concerned, like the idea of hurting Ethan through his presence is something he hasn't fully considered. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if you're a permanent fixture in our lives or a temporary one, because if this is temporary, then we need to start pulling back before he gets too attached. What do you want me to be? Forget what's smart or safe or any of the logical reasons this is complicated. What do you actually want? I want you to keep showing up. I want Tuesday and Friday to stay special. I want to see if what we have is real or just crisis bonding over my son's medical emergency. Then I'll keep showing up until you tell me to stop. He stands and moves closer, close enough that I have to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact, and the awareness that's been building between us for months finally reaches a breaking point that demands acknowledgement. Emma, I need you to understand something before we go any further down this path. His voice has gone low and serious. I'm falling in love with you. Have been falling since month 6 when you laughed at something ridiculous Ethan said and your whole face lit up. And it's selfish and wrong given everything between us, but I can't keep pretending it's just guilt or responsibility anymore. That's either the most romantic or most manipulative confession I've ever heard, and I can't decide which. Probably both. I've never been good at separating my feelings from my agendas. What if I'm falling too? What if watching you with my son and seeing how hard you're trying to make amends is making it impossible to maintain the distance I should be keeping? Then we're both making terrible decisions and we should probably stop before someone gets hurt. Or we acknowledge that life is short and complicated, and sometimes the right person shows up in the wrong way. I close the final distance between us, tired of almost and nearly, and the careful space we've been maintaining. And when I kiss him, it's with months of suppressed want and complicated feelings that don't fit neatly into categories of appropriate or smart. He responds immediately, hands coming up to frame my face while kissing me back with an intensity that suggests he's been holding back just as much as I have. And when we finally break apart, we're both breathing hard and staring at each other like we've crossed a line we can never uncross. That was either the best or worst decision you've ever made. I'm leaning toward best. Ask me again in 6 months when we've figured out if this is real or just very convincing chemistry. Mama, is Dominic your boyfriend now? Because Tommy at school says people only kiss like that in movies when they're boyfriend and girlfriend. Ethan's voice from across the room makes us spring apart like guilty teenagers. And when I turn, I find my son watching us with interested curiosity rather than upset. We're still figuring that out, buddy. I think he should be your boyfriend. He's nice, and he brings good presents, and he doesn't get mad when I beat him at cards. Those are excellent boyfriend qualifications. Dominic's voice is amused. And when I look at him, I see the careful vulnerability in his expression that suggests Ethan's opinion matters more than he's admitting. Yeah, okay, but if you're going to be Mama's boyfriend, you have to promise to keep reading stories with the funny voices. I can absolutely promise that. Later, after Ethan is asleep and Dominic is preparing to leave, we stand at my apartment door in the kind of charged silence that's become familiar over the last few weeks of growing proximity and complicated feelings. So we're doing this. We're actually attempting a relationship despite all the logical reasons it's a terrible idea. Apparently so, unless you've changed your mind in the last 4 hours. I haven't changed my mind. I'm terrified and probably making a huge mistake, but I haven't changed my mind. I reach up to touch his face, fingers tracing the scar along his jaw. Just promise me that when things get difficult, you'll talk to me instead of making decisions about what I can handle without asking. I promise to try. Old habits are hard to break, but I'll make a genuine effort. He turns his head to press a kiss to my palm. And Emma, thank you for giving me a chance I absolutely don't deserve. Thank me by proving you're worth the risk. Chapter 7. The threat returns. 3 weeks into Ethan's recovery, and 2 weeks into whatever this thing with Dominic is that we're carefully not labeling beyond boyfriend, despite the fact that he's essentially moved half his life into my small apartment. I come home from a grocery run to find him standing in my living room with an expression that makes my blood run cold before he even speaks. His phone is in his hand, and there are 3 men I don't recognize positioned at various points around my apartment, like they're guarding against something. And the careful way Dominic looks at me when I enter suggests whatever he's about to say is going to shatter the fragile peace we've been building over the last month. Man, Emma, I need you to stay calm and listen to everything I'm about to tell you before you react. Can you do that for me? His voice is controlled in that particular way that means he's barely holding on to his own composure. And I set down the groceries with shaking hands because whatever requires this level of security and careful tone is nothing good. Well, where's Ethan? Please tell me he's safe before you say anything else. He's at my house with Marco and a full security detail. I had them pick him up from school an hour ago using the authorization you gave me for emergencies. He moves closer but doesn't touch me, maintaining space like he's giving me room to process. He's completely safe and doesn't know anything is wrong. Marco is letting him play video games and eat ice cream. As far as Ethan knows, this is just a fun afternoon at Uncle Dominic's house. Why does my son need a security detail? What happened that requires armed guards in my apartment and you looking like someone just declared war? Because someone from your father's old situation found out you're connected to me now, found out that I'm the one who tried to help your father and failed, and they've decided that hurting you and Ethan would be an effective way to send a message about what happens to people who interfere in their business. The words are delivered with brutal efficiency, no softening or cushioning the blow. My father died 3 years ago. Why would anyone care now about something that happened that long ago? Because the people he was forced to work with are still active, and they've been consolidating power, eliminating loose ends, and anyone who might have information about their operations. Dominic's jaw clenches with visible tension. Your father knew details about routes and contacts that could still damage their business if that information reached the wrong people, and they're concerned that he might have shared those details with his family before he died. He didn't tell me anything. I didn't even know he was involved in anything illegal until you told me a few weeks ago. I know that, and you know that. But they don't believe in taking chances with potential witnesses, which means they see you and Ethan as problems that need to be permanently resolved. The clinical way he's describing threats to my life and my son's life makes me want to scream or cry, or possibly both. But instead, I find myself moving into logistics mode because falling apart won't keep us safe. What's the plan? How do we make sure they can't get to Ethan while also not living in fear for the rest of our lives? The plan is you and Ethan move into my house where I have security infrastructure they can't easily penetrate. And I handle the threat the way I should have handled it 3 years ago when your father first came to me. Handle it how exactly? Are we talking legal solutions or the kind that end with people disappearing? We're talking about whatever methods are necessary to ensure my family is safe. And yes, that includes options that won't involve law enforcement or courtrooms. He says it without apology or attempt to soften the reality of what he's offering. Your family. You're claiming us as yours to people who kill witnesses and eliminate threats. I claimed you the moment I fell in love with you. Everything else is just making that claim public to people who need to understand that touching either of you means declaring war on me and everything I control. And if making that claim public puts an even bigger target on us, if being openly connected to you makes us more vulnerable instead of more protected, then I'll deal with the consequences. But I'm not hiding you or pretending you're not the most important people in my life, because staying quiet didn't keep your father safe, and it won't keep you safe either. His hands finally reach for me, pulling me close with a desperation that suggests he's been restraining himself since I walked in. I need you to trust me to handle this. I need you to let me move you somewhere secure while I eliminate the threat properly this time. I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified that being with you is going to get my son killed the same way your advice got my father killed. The words come out harsh and cruel, but I can't take them back. Can't soften the fear that's been living in my chest since the moment I learned the truth about Dominic's connection to my father's death. But I know, and you have every right to be terrified given my track record with keeping people safe. He doesn't flinch from the accusation, doesn't try to defend himself or minimize my fear. Done, but I'm asking you to trust me anyway. To believe that I've learned from my failures and that this time I won't underestimate the threat or the lengths I need to go to protect what matters. What if trust isn't enough? What if good intentions and better planning still end with me planning another funeral? Then you'll have every right to hate me for the rest of your life. But at least you'll be alive to hate me instead of dead because I was too afraid to act decisively. One of the guards by the window speaks quietly into his radio, and I watch Dominic's expression shift from vulnerable to coldly dangerous in the span of a heartbeat as he processes whatever information he's receiving. We need to move now. There's been activity near the building that suggests they're planning something tonight rather than waiting. He's already pulling me toward the door while issuing rapid orders to his security team. Emma, I need you to grab whatever you and Ethan absolutely need for the next few days. Medications, favorite toys, anything that will make staying at my house less traumatic for him. This is insane. This is completely insane. We're running from people who want to kill us because I made the mistake of getting involved with you. You made the mistake of having a father who got involved with the wrong people. I just happened to be the person who failed to protect him properly. He's moving through my apartment with efficient precision, gathering items he knows Ethan will want based on weeks of daily visits. And yes, this is insane. Welcome to my world where violence is always lurking just beneath the surface of expensive suits and polite conversation. The drive to his house is silent and tense. Security vehicles flanking us on both sides while Dominic maintains a white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel that suggests he's barely holding onto control. His house turns out to be more fortress than home. All high walls and security gates and technology that probably costs more than most people make in a lifetime. And when we pull into the garage, I see Ethan through the window playing with Marco. Like this is just another fun adventure, rather than a life-threatening crisis. And he can't know how serious this is. I don't want him scared. Marco has instructions to keep things light and normal. As far as Ethan knows, we're having an extended sleepover at my house. An extended sleepover with armed guards and security protocols. That's going to be hard to hide from a curious 6-year-old. Kids see what we show them. If we act like everything is normal, then normal is what he'll believe until we can actually make it true. Marco appears with Ethan, who immediately runs to me with the kind of enthusiasm that suggests he's been having the time of his life rather than being evacuated for his safety. Mama, Dominic's house is huge and he has a game room with every video game ever made, and Marco says we can have pizza for dinner. That sounds amazing, baby. I'm holding him tighter than necessary, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, and feeling grateful that he's too young to understand the danger we're actually in. Dominic and Marco have a quiet conversation by the door that involves serious expressions and hand gestures that suggest they're planning something I'm probably better off not knowing details about. And when Dominic returns to us, there's determination in his expression that looks simultaneously reassuring and terrifying. I need to go handle some things. Marco will stay here with you, and there are 8 other guards positioned around the property. He crouches down to Ethan's level with a gentleness that contradicts everything about the dangerous man I know he is. And take care of your mom for me. Make sure she doesn't worry too much while I'm gone. Are you going to fight bad guys like a superhero? Something like that, but hopefully with less property damage and better planning. He ruffles Ethan's hair before standing and pulling me aside for a private conversation. And I'll be back before morning. Don't leave the house for any reason. Don't open doors for anyone except me or Marco. And if something feels wrong, trust your instincts and get to the safe room Marco will show you. You're talking like you might not come back. I'm talking like I'm being thorough about worst-case scenarios. But I have every intention of coming back because I'm not leaving you to raise Ethan alone. He kisses me hard and desperate, like he's trying to convey everything he might not get the chance to say if things go wrong. I love you. I know it's too soon and probably manipulative to say it when I'm walking into danger. But I need you to know that everything I'm doing tonight is because I love you and our son more than I've ever loved anything. Our son, you just called him our son. He feels like mine even though I have no legal or biological claim. Is that okay? Or am I overstepping? It's okay. It's more than okay. I'm crying now despite my best efforts to stay strong. Come back to us. Come back safe so we can figure out what this family looks like when we're not constantly running from your past mistakes. I promise I'll come back, even if I have to crawl through hell to do it. Then he's gone, leaving me in a fortress with armed guards and a 6-year-old who thinks this is all just an exciting adventure. And I'm left trying to figure out how to pray for the safety of a man who's probably doing terrible things to ensure my son and I survive the night. Chapter 8. The Final Truth. Dominic returns at 4 a.m. looking exhausted and slightly bloodied but alive, and the relief that floods through me when I see him walk through the door is so overwhelming, I actually forget to be angry about the blood on his shirt or the split knuckles that suggest whatever he did tonight involved direct violence rather than strategic delegation. He finds me in the living room where I've been alternating between pacing and sitting frozen with anxiety for the last 6 hours. And when our eyes meet, I see something in his expression that looks like relief, mixed with the weight of whatever he had to do to ensure our safety. It's done. The threat is eliminated, and you don't need to know the details beyond the fact that the people who wanted to hurt you and Ethan are no longer capable of hurting anyone. Are you okay? You're bleeding, and you look like you've been through hell. I'm moving toward him before I consciously decide to close the distance, hands reaching to examine injuries he's trying to minimize. I'm fine. This is nothing compared to what could have happened if I'd waited or tried to handle it diplomatically. He lets me fuss over him for a moment before catching my hands in his. Emma, I need to tell you something about your father. The complete truth I've been avoiding because it makes everything more complicated than the version I gave you before. What truth? What else could there possibly be beyond you giving him advice that got him killed? Your father's trip. The business trip he was supposed to take while I handled the threat. It wasn't just advice I gave him. It was a direct order from me. His voice is rough with emotion. He's barely containing. He worked for me. Not directly in the criminal side of my business, but in one of my legitimate shipping companies. And when I found out the people using his routes, I'm the one who told him he had to go. Had to make it look like a normal business trip while I cleaned up the situation. You're saying my father worked for you, that he wasn't just asking for help, but following orders from his employer. Yes. And if I'd known how connected the people using him were, if I'd understood the level of danger properly, I would have handled it differently. Would have gotten him and your family into witness protection instead of trying to solve it quietly. So he died following your orders, doing what his boss told him to do, instead of making his own choice about how to handle the situation. The realization makes my chest tight with complicated feelings I don't know how to process. He died because I underestimated the threat and overestimated my ability to protect everyone involved. And I've been carrying that failure for 3 years while watching you struggle with consequences I created through my arrogance. Why didn't you tell me this before? Why let me think he came to you for help instead of admitting he was following your orders? Because making myself directly responsible felt worse than just being the person who gave bad advice. Because admitting I had power over your father's choices made his death feel even more like my fault than it already did. He's looking at me with raw vulnerability. Yet I've been a coward about the complete truth, because telling you meant risking that you'd see me exactly as I am. Someone who makes decisions that get good people killed despite trying to protect them. I should be angry, should feel betrayed by this additional layer of deception. But instead, I find myself understanding the distinction he's been trying to make between direct responsibility and failure of judgment. My father trusted you enough to work for you, trusted your judgment enough to follow your orders even when it put him in danger. Yes, and I failed that trust spectacularly. But you've spent 3 years trying to make amends, spent 11 months watching over us and making sure we had what we needed, spent the last month proving you've learned from your mistakes. I move closer until we're standing toe-to-toe. I'm not saying the past doesn't matter, or that what happened to my father is okay, but I am saying that watching you with Ethan, Seeing how hard you're trying to be better than the man who made those mistakes, it makes me believe that people can actually change if they're willing to do the work. You're far more forgiving than I deserve. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of carrying anger that doesn't change anything and ready to build something new with someone who actually shows up when it matters. Emma, I love you and Ethan more than I thought I was capable of loving anything, and I know I don't have the right to ask for forever when we've only been together a few weeks. But I'm asking anyway, because the thought of not having you both in my life permanently makes it hard to breathe. Is this a proposal, or just a very intense declaration of feelings? It's me being honest about what I want, even though the timing is terrible and we should probably wait longer before having this conversation. He pulls a small box from his pocket with shaking hands. This was my mother's ring. She left it to me with instructions to give it to someone who made me want to be better than what I was raised to be. And Emma, you make me want to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me despite every reason you have to walk away. Dominic, we've been together less than a month. I know. And if you need more time, I'll wait as long as it takes. But I needed you to know that this isn't casual for me. That when I say you and Ethan are my family, I mean it with every part of myself. Ask me properly. Get on your knee and ask me like you mean it. He drops to one knee right there in his living room at 4 a.m. with blood still on his shirt and exhaustion written across his features. And when he opens the box, I see a ring that's elegant and understated. Exactly what I would have chosen for myself if he'd asked. Emma, will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of you and Ethan? Will you give me the chance to be the father he deserves and the partner you need? Will you let me love you both properly instead of from a distance filled with guilt and regret? Yes, but with conditions. And name them. I'll agree to anything. We do therapy together to work through the complicated history and make sure we're building something healthy instead of just trauma bonding. We tell Ethan the truth about my father when he's old enough to understand. And you promise that when things get difficult, you talk to me instead of making decisions alone about what I can handle. Done. All of it. Anything else? Love us loudly, publicly, without shame or hesitation. I want everyone to know we're yours and you're ours. That's the easiest promise I've ever made. He slides the ring on my finger and stands, pulling me into a kiss that tastes like relief and hope and new beginnings built on honest foundations. Epilogue. 6 months later. The diner closes 6 months after the proposal, because I don't need to work double shifts anymore when I'm married to a man who insists on taking care of everything. But we still visit every Tuesday and Friday for dinner, because some traditions are worth keeping even when circumstances change. Ethan is thriving with healthy lungs and a father who shows up for every school event and bedtime story. And watching Dominic be the dad my son deserves makes me fall in love with him all over again every single day. We're sitting in booth 7 when Dominic pulls out his wallet to pay the check, and I watch him deliberately place exact change on the table with no tip, just like that night 11 months ago that changed everything between us. No tip. Are you trying to send a message? The message is, I don't need to leave excessive tips anymore because I already have everything I want. He reaches across the table to take my hand, thumb stroking over the ring that's become as familiar as breathing. I found my family, my purpose, my reason to be better than what I was. So the tips are obsolete. That's very sweet. But you should probably still tip our server, because she just brought us excellent service. Fine, but only because you asked nicely. He adds bills to the table with a smile that's genuine and unguarded. Ethan looks up from his coloring with chocolate on his face and complete contentment in his expression. Well, Daddy, can we come back here next Tuesday, too? Absolutely. Every Tuesday and Friday for as long as you want. And sitting there in the booth where everything started, watching my husband and son plan next week's diner visit with enthusiasm, I realized that sometimes the most broken beginnings lead to the strongest foundations, and love built on truth and hard-won trust is worth every complicated step it took to get here. The end.